Hello everyone and welcome to this week's After Effects scripting tutorial. In this one, I'm going to be showing you how to make a smart text scale script that will take any of your text and apply a special expression to make sure the width contains within a certain width area. So if I type in whatever width I want, say 500, and maybe a height of 500 as well, and then apply it to any of my text here, it's going to then make it so that no matter how many characters I type, it's going to then fit within the width that we give it. So how type fits in here, and the more I type, the more it's going to reduce the font size in order to fit inside of whatever width we give it. We're also going to have the option to apply width and height controls so that we can further adjust it after we've created it. And before we get started with this script, I have to give a big shout out to Nasco, who created the idea for this expression and asked me to make it into a script. Nasco is a French motion graphics designer. You should definitely check out his work. He does a lot of cool stuff involving news graphics and all sorts of awesome things that you would see on the news and in big productions. Donc merci beaucoup Nasco pour l'idée pour le script, et on va continuer avec votre idée. So make sure you check out Nasco's profile and you can support him who thought of this great idea. And before we begin also, I want to remind you to hit subscribe and the bell icon down below. That way you're notified of when new videos are coming out twice a week on the channel. And down there as well, you're going to see a GitHub link with the code for this script so you can use it yourself or modify it to your liking. And down there as well, you'll also see an Instagram link to follow us on Instagram and be notified immediately of when uploads and behind the scenes things are up. And also you want to check out our new Discord server where we have a general scripting extensions and plugins section where we can have full discussions on questions we may have, answer other people's questions, collaborate, and soon I'll be adding an expressions channel to add a little bit more depth of discussion there as well. So make sure you join us over there. We've already got a solid 27 members and growing. So let's go ahead and get started creating this script today. Basically what we're going to need to do is create a very simple UI with this logo, which we don't have to put if you don't want, the width, the height input, and an option to apply these controls. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and put these windows side by side here, and I'm going to begin by just copying this logo binary, and this is going to be the start of our script, which just contains this smart text scale logo. So we're going to create a new JavaScript file and zoom in just a little bit here. And I'm going to paste our logo binary. We're creating a variable called logo binary, which contains the binary information of our PNG logo image. If you're not familiar with how to do this, you can check on the little info button to check out that tutorial. And again, thanks to Nasco for this script. The link for his channel will be in the script as well as in the description. And let's go ahead and get started with the rest of the UI. We need to create a window to contain everything. So say window is equal to a new window. And the type of window we're going to be creating is a palette. Doesn't need a name and doesn't need any defined size. Then, because we're going to need groups going from top to bottom, we'll make the orientation of our window column. So we'll say window.orientation is equal to a column. And then we need a group for each of these little elements. We'll need a group for the logo, a group for the width, a group for the height, and a group for the controls and apply button. But in our case, the logo can actually just go and add it to the window. We don't need its own special group. So I'm going to say var logo is equal to our window.add. We're going to add an image with undefined size, and the image we're going to be using is our logo binary variable. You can either give this a binary of your PNG or JPEG image, or you can give it a path or file to the actual image itself if you have it locally on your computer. Then we're going to want to create group 1. This is going to be for our width information. We're going to set this equal to our window. We're going to add a group, undefined size, and call it group 1. Then, so all the elements inside of this group go from left to right, we're going to have this width text, and then the actual input needs to go from left to right. So we'll say group 1 dot orientation is equal to a row. And then we're going to do the same thing and create two more groups, one for the height and then the other for the controls and button. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. And to make things quick, we'll just change everything from group 2, and then instead of group 1, this needs to be group 3. And now we'll have our 3 groups. We now just need to populate it with these different elements. So for group 1, we're going to need a width text and a width input text. And we want the width and height to be the same, so we're going to forcibly tell these what width and height they should be. So what we're going to do inside of group 1 is create a width static text, or we can just call it width text. We're going to add this to group 1, create a static text, undefined size, which we'll define in a second actually, and we're going to call it the width. Then we'll take the width text and set the size to something that we want. I think at least 50 pixels for this. Let's go ahead and set it to 50 by 25 or something. And then we'll need a width edit text box so the user can input whatever width they want. And to do this, we're going to add this to group 1 as well. We're going to create an edit text, undefined size, and we'll start off just giving it 1920, the general width of most comps. And we're going to also define the width edit text dot size, or we can actually set it to characters. If you want to set the number of characters that they can input, let's set it to like 6. Then I'm going to go ahead and copy our width text and width edit text and paste them so that we now are going to add them to group 2. So we need to make sure these are set to group 2, and we're going to change width to height. And then make sure we replace all the names here with the proper new names. That way we don't get confused. And width edit text needs to be changed to height edit text, and we'll change that to 1080. Now let's just go ahead and check up on how this is looking. Grab our window and center it, and then we'll grab our window and show it. Now if we go ahead and run this in After Effects, you can see I forgot a parentheses here. And now our script is looking pretty much the same. We just need to add a checkbox and a button to apply things. And we can see the width here might be a little bit too wide, so we can just set this down to maybe 40. And then we're going to go down here and create a checkbox and a button. The checkbox will add these effect sliders onto the text layer so we can live adjust the expression and the width that it should be contained in. So we're just going to say checkbox is equal to group 3. We're going to add a checkbox, undefined size, and we'll just have the text apply controls. And by default, we're going to want that checkbox to be checked. And in order to make sure that's true, we're going to set the value of the checkbox equal to true. Then we're going to need an apply button, which we're also going to add to group 3. We're going to add a button, undefined size, and we're going to call this apply. Now if we go ahead and run our script, everything is ready to go. We just need to now program the functionality, which consists of making sure the user has a composition selected, making sure they have at least one text layer selected, and then we're going to either apply just a single expression, or we're going to apply an expression and these controls that are linked to it. So now I'm going to go ahead and create the actuation for when we hit this button on apply. So below everything, I'm going to take my apply button and say on click is equal to a function. And inside of here, first we're going to check if there's an active composition. We need to make sure they have a comp selected. Then we need to make sure they have some layers, at least one layer selected. And then we need to check whether those layers that are selected are text layers. So we're going to create an if statement, and this is a very widely used if statement for checking if the comp is selected. We're going to check two things. If app.project.activeItem is equal to null, or if no active item exists, nothing is actively selected in After Effects, or if the inverse logic of our app.project.activeItem is an instance of a comp item. This means if there's no active item selected, and actually I need to change this to or. So what this is saying is if our active item, there's no active item in After Effects, that's a problem. Or if there is an active item and it's not a comp item, that's also a problem. If this problem arises, we need to tell the user, please select a comp, and we'll return false so that it doesn't go any further in the code. Then if we've gotten this far past this return false, we know that there is an active comp, so I can set a variable called comp equal to app.project and our active item. Then we need to check if this comp has layers selected. So we're going to say if comp.selectedLayers.length is less than 1. So we need one selected layer. If we find that there's less than one selected layer, we're going to tell the user, please select at least one text layer. Then we'll say return false. And then once again, if we make it past this code, we know that there's some selected layers. Now what we're going to do now is set up a custom function to check whether our selected layers are actually text layers or not. So I'm going to create a variable called checked text layers and set this equal to check for text layers, and I'm going to give it my comp.selectedLayers. Now this is a custom function we're going to write really fast, and all it's going to do is take in a bunch of layers and tell us how many of them are text layers. And better yet, we're going to also return the ones that are text layers if that's the case. So we're going to return an array from this function. If the length is 0, we know there's 0 text layers. And what we're going to do is create a function called check for text layers, give it the argument layers. Then we're going to create an array inside of here called text layers, which is going to be empty. And at the end, we're going to want to give back those text layers so that whatever we fill up with the text layers is going to be then this checked text layers variable. And then we just need to loop through all of our layers, and we're going to say var I is equal to 0. We're starting at 0 because it's an array of text layers rather than starting at index 1 of the composition. And I'm going to say for I is less than our layers.length, increment I by 1. Then for each time, we're going to check each layer. We're going to say if layers I dot property source text, if that exists, we know it's a text layer. Because the only time you're going to see this property called source text is inside of a text layer. So one way to check for specific layer types is if it has a certain property, for example, a camera has a zoom property, you can go ahead and check if that exists and use that as a conditional to gather those type of layers. And if that's the case, that it has a source text, we're going to take our text layers array and push in our current layers. Then it's going to then go through all those layers, check all the ones that are text layers, and then return them. So back inside of our apply button on click, we're then going to check the length of our checked text layers. So we're going to say if the checked text layers dot length is less than 1, or you can say is equal to 0, then we need to say please select at least one text layer. And we'll return false so it doesn't go further in the code. So now let's go ahead and just alert our checked text layers to make sure we're getting far. And we'll run the script. Let's first go ahead and make sure we don't have anything selected. And you can see it's going to say please select a comp. So I'll select a comp but no layers. Then it's going to say please select at least one text layer. Then if I maybe add a solid and try and select that, it's still going to tell me please select a text layer. So once I finally select the text layer, it's going to then alert me that text layer. And if I then had a bunch of text layers, let's just duplicate this a bunch, you can see it's going to give me all of the text layers that are selected. So now that we have all the checks set up, we can now create the main function that's going to apply these expressions and information. So what I'm going to do is first create an app.begin undo group and an app.end undo group. And we're just going to call it auto text layer scaling. And inside of here, we're going to create our function. So that way, if we have a bunch of text layers we apply these expressions to, we can easily control Z and undo it. So we're just going to call this apply expressions. And we're going to need a few arguments. The first of which is going to be our width. So in order to get the proper width, we're just going to parse int. We need to parse the text out into an integer, the width edit text.text. We're also going to get the height. So I'm going to say the height edit text, and we need to parse that as well. Parse int text. And then lastly, we need to have like a Boolean, a true or false, of whether or not this checkbox is enabled. If it's true, then it's checked, and if it's false, it's unchecked. So to do that, I'm going to grab my checkbox.value and pass that as the third argument. Then down here, we'll go ahead and define this function called apply expressions. And the arguments, we're just going to call width, height, and expression bool, which again, true means we're going to apply these expression sliders, and false means it will just do whatever height we gave it in the user interface. And of course, I forgot to bring in our checked text layers, so we'll make that the first argument so we have all of our layers to deal with. And now inside of apply expressions, we'll have our layers. And what I'm going to do is first create a variable called ActiveComp. And we can either say app.project.activeItem, but one thing I like to do nowadays is just to grab one of the layers and grab the containing comp. This will go up a level and grab the composition it's within. And since there's only one composition we're working with, whatever text layer you choose, whether it's text layer 1, 6, or whatever, it's still going to be the same composition. Then I'm going to create two variables, one called width effect and the other called height effect. And these are going to store these two slider controls if we use them. Now we're going to go ahead and create a for loop to loop through all of our text layers here. So I'll say for var I is equal to 0, for I is less than our layers.length, increment I by 1. Then we're going to need an if-else statement. The if is going to say if our expression bool is true, and in this case we don't have to type out is equal to true. We can just say if our expression bool sort of exists, this will give us true. If you wanted to check if it was false, you could just invert the logic by adding an exclamation mark. So then inside of this first one, if the expression bool is true, we want to basically use these sliders here and then apply those to the expression. Else, if any other case is the case, then we just want to apply the standardized expression, which I will explain in a second. And one more thing we actually want to check is because we're going to be applying this expression to the scale, what we need to do is first make sure there's no expression already applied. When my friend Nasco gave me this idea for the script, he wanted to make sure that if it was already applied, it would just apply the expression once. It wouldn't keep overriding it over and over. You could go in and adjust that if you want, but in my case, I only want to apply the expression to the text layer if there's no expression already. So in order to do this, I'm going to create an if statement, and I'm going to say if layers I, our current layer, and we're going to check the property Adobe Transform Group, and this property is basically equivalent to this transform dropdown. And then another layer down, we need to grab the scale. So dot property Adobe scale, and I'm using the match names here so it works in any language. And we're just going to check if expression enabled. And if the expression enabled is equal to false, that means there's no expression applied. If it's true, there's currently an expression applied. So if this is the case, there's no expression on our text layer. Now we can go ahead and create all of the stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab our width effect and set this equal to our layers I dot effects, and we're going to add a property called an Adobe slider control. And that's what these guys are, just slider controls. And then I'm going to set our width effect dot name equal to width, so that way we can change the name of our effect up here to whatever we want. And then lastly, I'm going to set the effect dot property 1, or the slider value. I'm going to set the value equal to our width we're bringing in from our UI here. Then I'll go ahead and copy and paste this and change it to height effect. And we're just going to change the names here so everything works. And then lastly, we just need to apply the expression, which will be linked to these values here. You can see we're creating a couple of variables in our expression. One for the max width, which is equivalent to the max width of what our text layer should be. This is linked to our width slider. The max height, which is linked to our height slider. And then we do some math where we get the whole size of the text, and then we calculate another width and height. And then this algorithm here is what Nasco mainly provided to me, which is what gives it the awesome look. It calculates the scalar, so if you have an 100% scale, it's going to properly size it up to match whatever the width is. So we're just going to copy and paste this expression as is, and then modify it so it fits properly. And what we're going to do is grab our layers I, and again we're going to reference our scale. So we need to say .transform group .property Adobe scale .expression is equal to single quotes, and we're going to paste it in here. Now it's going to look ugly at first if it's on multiple lines, but we're going to fix this. In order to fix this, we're going to, at the beginning of every weird looking line here, we're going to add a line break by saying /r, and then we'll backslash it up to the next line. Just adding a bunch of line breaks here and creating one single line of text, because that's what our expression needs to be. If you ever want a new line, you just need to add a return carriage here. So once it's in one single line, it'll all lock in together and just be purple like this, and that's exactly what we want. So now we should have this working. Let's go ahead and clear our text layer here, clear the effects, and see if it works. So again, we only have the code if the expression bool is true, so only it will work right now if our apply controls is checked. So let's just go ahead and set this to like 2000 by 1000 and click on apply. And in my case, I'm actually not even getting very far at all in the code. I'm not sure where it's stopping. So just a quick look here, we're going to throw in some right lines and see how far we get. If I select this, you can see I'm getting to here. I'm getting all the way to 4. Which means that I'm making it inside of here. Let's see how far specifically we're getting. I think it's failing right before we apply the width effect. So we get to 1 but not 2. That means we're not getting past this here. If layers I.property transform, we're missing the S. See, these small errors in JavaScript can be a pain in the butt, but it's important to know how to find them by just sticking in alerts or write lines to find the error. So let's go ahead and try this again. Now when we apply it, it's going to apply our 2 effects here and apply the expression in the proper format. And now if I change the scale or the width of this, then it's going to change that. And if I start to type some text, then it's going to then begin sizing it accordingly to the width we set it to. Now lastly, the else statement. If we have this unchecked, the only difference is we're going to apply this expression, but instead of giving it the width and height sliders, which are not going to exist, we're going to give it whatever the values in the UI are. So in this case, it would say 1920 is the max width and the max height is 1080. And then it would update it like that. So one option gives you a little bit more control after the fact, and one will just set it in stone of what the values will be. So lastly, all we need to do is copy and paste this if statement. We're going to check again if there's no expression applied to our scale property. And if that's the case, we're going to apply the same expression here. And the difference is, instead of using these effects, we're going to break outside of the expression and bring in our variables. So say width plus, and then instead of effect height slider, we need to bring in our height. And I believe that should be it. Let's go ahead and undo all of the stuff we did here and run the script. So now if we apply our controls, it's going to apply these controls that we can custom set up to whatever width we want. We can easily undo it all in one click. And now if we deselect apply controls and apply our expression, it's going to hard code whatever the value is into the expression that was inside of our UI. So thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell icon down below to be notified of new videos coming out twice weekly on the channel. And down below you can check out the code for this video in the GitHub link, as well as an Instagram link to follow us and be notified of new live videos coming out. Another reminder to join our Discord, where you can get help with scripting, extensions, and plugins, have general discussions with people, and collaborate. And then lastly, down in the description, there's also donation links for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Basic Attention Token, which you're welcome to donate if you want. Thanks again for watching this video, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.